He watched me like a predator watches its prey, every single day, for 6 months. Lorenzo Vitali was not just my boss, he was the most powerful man in New York's underworld, a man who could make people disappear with a single phone call, a man who noticed when I changed my perfume, when I wore my hair down, when I twisted my grandmother's ring out of nervousness, and when I told him I had a date with another man. Everything changed. "Everything about you is my concern, Lily," he said, his Italian accent cutting through the silence like a blade. "You are my employee." "I am your employee from 9 until 6, I replied. "My activities after that are my own." But we both knew that was a lie. One innocent date, one red dress, one moment that shattered every boundary between us. I should have run. I should have chosen safety. Instead, I chose the most dangerous man I had ever met, and he chose me right back. This is more than a love story. It is about a woman who discovered that true strength is not about playing it safe. It is about knowing your worth, standing your ground, and choosing to live fully, even when the world tells you to be afraid. If you have ever been told you were too bold, too defiant, or too much, this story will remind you that sometimes being too much is exactly what sets you free. Before we dive in, if stories about fierce women and impossible love speak to your soul, please subscribe to this channel and ring that notification bell. Leave a comment telling me, have you ever chosen passion over safety? And if this story touches you, share it with a friend who needs to hear it. Now, let us begin. The espresso machine in Lorenzo Vitali's private office gave a serpentine hiss, its steam clouding air that was already heavy with the smell of dark coffee and rich leather. I stood at the mahogany sideboard, making his third coffee of the morning. 6 months of working for him had given me a practiced efficiency, though under his employment felt like the wrong word. Perhaps it was more like being beside him, or even against him, given how frequently we argued. "The Calabrese file is on your desk," I said, not needing to turn around. I knew he was in the room, even though the Persian rug had silenced his footsteps. Lorenzo Vitali had the movements of a predator, always silent, always deliberate, and always conscious of every other person in his space. And before you ask, I took out the clause regarding the harbor contracts. "I did not ask for your permission. I was right to remove it." From behind me came the quiet sound of cloth as he took his seat, followed by the familiar click of his Mont Blanc pen. "You seem especially defiant this morning, Lily. It is 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Mr. Vitali." I prepared his espresso just the way he liked. There was no sugar, and I served it in the special cup from his grandmother, the one with the delicate gold lines around its edge. Then, I turned to look at him. Lorenzo was seated behind a desk so large he looked like a dark king observing his realm. His charcoal suit was tailored so perfectly it seemed to be painted on his wide shoulders. His dark hair was brushed back from a face that could have been on an ancient Roman coin, full of sharp lines and noble structure. But his eyes were what always managed to unnerve me. They were the color of a storm, and they were relentlessly smart, able to decipher every small expression, every single hint of emotion. Those eyes followed me as I walked across his office, and I could feel their intensity like a physical weight pressing against my back. I realized early on in my job that Lorenzo saw everything. He saw the way I would twist my grandmother's ring when I felt nervous. He knew I bit my bottom lip when I was focused. He recognized the exact tilt of my head when I had to tell him something he would not want to hear. "The meeting with the Rossi brothers is scheduled for 7, I informed him, placing his espresso on the desk with a little more force than was needed. One drop of coffee spilled, staining the gleaming wood. "I have put together the briefing materials. Marco is going to drive you. I will not be here." His hand, which had been reaching for the coffee cup, stopped in midair. "I beg your pardon, I am leaving the office early today." My voice remained level and professional, despite the familiar rapid beat of my heart that always started whenever Lorenzo's complete attention was fixed on me. I have plans. Plans? He said the word as if it were from another language. His fingertips tapped on the desk a single time. It was a rare signal of annoyance from a man who had built an entire reputation on maintaining perfect control. What sort of plans? They are personal. A long silence stretched between us. Outside the massive windows behind him, Manhattan sparkled under the late afternoon light, a city of steel and glass and wealth. From his high office, Lorenzo Vitali looked out on an empire that went far beyond his legal real estate companies and import ventures. Everyone was aware of what he truly was, but nobody dared to say it out loud. Not if they wanted to remain in good health. I had discovered the reality of his business 2 months after I started working there, when I accidentally overheard a conversation I was not supposed to hear. The sensible move would have been to resign right away, to get as far away as possible from the perilous world Lorenzo called his own. But instead, I had come into his office the following morning, set his espresso on his desk, and told him, "The Martinelli shipment is coming in on Tuesday. You will want to be there yourself." He had simply looked at me for a whole minute. Then he said, "You are either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish, Miss Morgan. I am practical, Mr. Vitali, and I make very good coffee." Something changed between us in that instant. It might have been an understanding, or maybe it was just a recognition that I had crossed a boundary I could never uncross. In any case, I had held on to my position, my silence, and my developing tolerance for the specific kind of turmoil that came with the job of working for Lorenzo Vitali. He was now standing up and walking around his desk with that same predator's elegance. "Personal plans," he said again, his accent stroking the words. Lorenzo's English was perfect, but when he felt strong emotions, his Italian background would subtly shade his pronunciation. "With whom?" "That is none of your concern." His jaw muscles tensed, a barely visible motion. "Everything about you is my concern, Lily. You are my employee. I am your employee from 9 in the morning until 6 in the evening. My activities after that time are my own." I folded my arms across my chest, a defensive move I regretted as soon as his eyes dropped to it before snapping back to my face. We were standing too near to each other now, so near I could smell his cologne. It was a custom fragrance that likely cost more than what I paid for my apartment each month, with hints of bergamot and cedar. So near I could make out the faint scar that ran along his jawline. It was a thin, white mark that hinted at a violent history. "You are wearing perfume," he noted quietly. "You do not ever wear perfume to work." My heart skipped a beat. I had put on a little of my favorite fragrance that morning, a light mix of vanilla and jasmine. The simple fact that he had noticed, that he was so familiar with my daily habits that he could spot this small change, created a flutter in my stomach that was not caused by fear. Maybe I just wanted to wear it today. His eyes narrowed just a fraction. "And what about your hair? You always have it tied up." My hand automatically went to the loose curls that fell below my shoulders. I had taken an hour that morning to use a curling iron, which was something I almost never did for the office. "I have a date, Mr. Vitali. Is that satisfactory to you, or must I get your written approval to have a private life?" The air in the office suddenly felt colder. Lorenzo's face remained unchanged. He had too much self-control for that, but a dark, threatening glint appeared in his stormy gray eyes. A date. His voice was like velvet covering a blade of steel. Yes, a date. The activity where two people who are not in an employer-employee relationship go out to enjoy some time together. I wished I could take back the sarcastic comment as soon as it came out. My 6 months with Lorenzo had shown me that provoking him was exciting, but it was almost never a good idea. And who might this lucky person be? His name is Tyler. We were introduced at Sophia's birthday celebration last week. I reached for my purse, which I had placed on a side table, feeling a sudden, urgent need to get away from the crushing weight of Lorenzo's intense gaze. "Now, if I may be excused, I have to get home so I can change." I had taken only 3 steps toward the door when his voice made me stop. Change into what, precisely? Clothes, Mr. Vitali. Showing up to a restaurant without them is generally not encouraged. A muscle in his jaw twitched, the only sign of his frustration. You know what I am asking. I turned around, feeling an unreasonable irritation at his questions. 6 months of his commands, his critiques, and his very rare compliments that felt like winning a grand prize. 6 months of seeing him move through the office with a succession of gorgeous women, each one more breathtaking than the one before. It had been 6 months of pretending I was unaffected when he stood a little too near, or when his hand would touch mine as we exchanged papers, or when he would call me to his office late in the evening, and I would see him looking at me with an expression I was never able to understand. Something nice, I replied, my tone more biting than I had meant it to be. Something that allows me to feel attractive. Is that acceptable to you? Or do you also have to give your approval for my clothing selections? For a brief time, Lorenzo was silent. Then he said, Be careful, Lily. You are not aware of the kinds of men that are out there. The sincerity of the concern in his voice took me by surprise. My attitude softened a little. I will be all right. Tyler works as a stockbroker, a very respectable man. Stockbrokers can be dangerous as well, not nearly as dangerous as certain other people I know. The remark escaped my lips before I could prevent it, and I felt immediate regret when I saw Lorenzo's face become completely unreadable. 5 o'clock, he stated, his voice now entirely businesslike and cold. Do not arrive late tomorrow. I gave a nod and quickly left, the sound of my heels echoing on the marble floor of the reception area. My hands were shaking a little as I collected my belongings. Adrenaline and another feeling, one I did not want to think about too much, was rushing through me. Lucia, the receptionist, glanced up from her desk with an all-knowing expression. Was this trouble in paradise? I thought there was no paradise, only a gilded cage. I jabbed the elevator button over and over. My captor was a controlling man who refused to respect my limits. Lucia offered a knowing smile. If you say so. The descent of 43 floors gave me a moment to compose myself. The situation was absurd. Lorenzo Vitali was my employer. He was a dangerous individual. His world was built on violence and influence, a world I wanted nothing to do with. The fact that he made my heart pound and my cheeks burn was an inconvenient truth, a risk I could not take. Tyler represented safety. He was normal. Perhaps he was dull, but dull was a good thing. Dull meant I could rest at night without the fear of men in dark suits appearing at my home. Dull meant a life free from federal inquiries or conflicts between rival families. A boring life meant not constantly feeling as if I stood on a cliff's edge, torn between the terror of the fall and the urge to leap. My home was a humble one-bedroom apartment in Queens, a 40-minute train ride from Lorenzo's tower on Fifth Avenue. I took a fast shower, hoping to rinse away the tension from our argument. The red dress was on my closet door, right where I had left it that morning. It was an impulse buy from the week before, a justification that I earned something beautiful, even if it was more than I could truly afford. The material was silk, its color a deep crimson that made my skin seem to radiate. The cut was conservative at the top, but the garment clung to my every curve before flaring out just above my knees. I had never worn a dress like this, because I never had a life that required it. In the mirror, I saw a stranger looking back at me. My hair fell in soft curls, my makeup was subtle, and the red fabric made me look like someone else entirely. A confident, captivating woman who belonged in Lorenzo's world. Someone who could walk into an expensive restaurant and own the room. The idea was both terrifying and exciting. My phone vibrated. It was a text from Tyler. He was running 15 minutes late and would meet me at Regis at 8. I replied to confirm, then grabbed my purse, fighting the tightness in my chest. This was a good thing, a normal thing. It was what ordinary people did. They dated nice, predictable men who never made them feel like they were one step away from getting burned. Tyler picked a high-end Italian place with low lighting and crisp white tablecloths. I got there first. The hostess led me to a table in the back. The restaurant was filled with the sounds of the dinner crowd, a pleasant murmur that filled the space. I ordered a glass of wine and waited, watching the people around me. There were couples celebrating anniversaries, business meetings coming to an end, and a table of women laughing together. They were just normal people, living their normal lives. They had no idea another world existed right under their feet. A world where men like Lorenzo Vitali could end a life with a single phone call. I was so deep in my own thoughts that I barely noticed Tyler when he finally appeared, looking a little out of breath and full of apologies. "Lily, I am so sorry," he said. "There was an emergency at work." He was handsome, but in a very standard way. He had blonde hair, blue eyes, and a sharp jawline. His suit was expensive, but it was not tailored for him. His smile was charming, but it held no danger. He was the definition of a safe choice. "Do not worry," I said, smiling back. "I just arrived." The date began smoothly. Tyler was thoughtful and asked about my job. I gave him vague answers because I had learned a long time ago not to bring up Lorenzo in casual conversation. He told me funny stories about his own career. He was polite, engaged, and proper, everything you would want on a first date. So why did I keep glancing at my phone? Why did my heart race every time a man with dark hair walked past our table? And why did I feel like I was betraying someone just by being there? "You seem somewhere else," Tyler noted as he poured more wine into my glass. "Is everything all right?" "I am fine," I lied. "It was just a long day at the office. Your boss sounds like he is difficult to work for." Tyler leaned back in his chair, and his expression changed into something more calculating. "The long hours and high stress must be hard on you." A warning bell went off in my head, but I ignored it. "It has its challenges." "What exactly does your company do?" he asked. "You said it was in imports." The question sounded innocent, but his eyes were too sharp, too focused. "We handle various things, mostly international trade." "That must be fascinating, dealing with so many different markets." He smiled, but the smile was cold. "I have always considered getting into that line of work. Perhaps you could share some inside information." The warning bells were screaming now. "I am just a secretary, Tyler. My job is filing papers and making coffee. It is not exciting." He reached across the table and took my hand. His grip was just a little too firm. "I am willing to bet you are much more than that. A woman who works for a man like Lorenzo Vitali has to know all sorts of interesting things." My blood turned to ice. "How do you know who my boss is?" "Sophia told me," Tyler said quickly. A little too quickly. His thumb drew circles on my hand. The gesture should have been comforting, but it made my skin crawl. "She mentioned you worked for a major businessman." "Sophia has no idea where I work." My words were flat and cold. I had always been careful not to tell my friends about my job. An instinct warned me that being connected to Lorenzo Vitali, even as his assistant, was a dangerous secret. "So I will ask you one more time. How do you know who I work for?" The charming smile on Tyler's face vanished for a second, replaced by something much harder. "Look, Lily, I think we started this incorrectly. I think this date is finished." I started to get up, but his hand tightened on mine, holding me down. "Do not cause a scene," he said quietly, his smile back in place for anyone who might be watching. "Just listen to me for 1 minute. Let go of my hand. My family has some business with Mr. Vitali. It is nothing important, just some shared interests in the import business." His eyes were now hard and strategic. "We thought it would be helpful to have a friendly contact on the inside. You strike me as a smart woman, Lily. You are smart enough to know how the world really operates." My heart was pounding in my chest. "You planned this entire thing. The party, our meeting, all of it was a lie. I like to call it strategic networking." His thumb continued to draw those awful circles on my skin. "We are not asking for much. We just want a little information now and then. What meetings are scheduled? Who is coming to the office? Things like that. And for your trouble, we would pay you very well." 6 months ago, I might have been foolish enough to be flattered by his proposal. But that was 6 months ago, before I knew what I know now. 6 months ago, I had not spent every day observing Lorenzo, learning to recognize the subtle cues that came before violence. I had not learned the rules of his world, and the most important rule in that world was that betrayal always had a price. You are asking me to spy on Lorenzo Vitali. I kept my voice steady, even as fear and anger churned inside me. Do you understand how incredibly stupid that is? We are asking you to be smart. Your boss is not a good person, Lily. He is a dangerous and violent man. Sooner or later, he is going to fall, and you do not want to be anywhere near him when it happens. Tyler leaned in and lowered his voice. We are giving you a way out. We can offer you money, protection, and a new life somewhere you will be safe. I just stared at him. This handsome man had built an elaborate trap that looked like a romance. Who exactly is we? I asked. Are you people who can protect me from Vitali when he learns I know too much? Or are you people who will use me and then kill me when I am no longer valuable? I pulled my hand back so hard that it knocked over my wine glass. The red liquid bled across the white cloth. The image was not lost on me. I have to go. I stood up, and this time Tyler let me. But his voice followed me out. Think about my offer, Lily. You are not one of them. You do not belong in his world. Be smart and get out while you can. I grabbed my purse and walked toward the door, my breathing shallow and fast. The hostess gave me a worried look as I hurried past, but I could not stop. I could not think. I could not even begin to understand what just happened. Tyler knew my boss, he knew Lorenzo's name, and he had done enough research to fake an entire relationship. That meant other people could know about me too. They could be watching me, waiting for a chance to use me against Lorenzo. The cool night air was a shock to my face as I stumbled out of the restaurant. I stood there on the sidewalk, trying to get my bearings, trying to remember how to breathe. My phone buzzed in my purse. It was probably Tyler, sending another message. I did not look at it. The smart move was to go home, lock all my doors, and start looking for a new job. First thing in the morning, I would walk into Lorenzo's office and resign. I would get out before I was caught in the middle of whatever game Tyler's family was playing. That was the smart move. But as I stood on that sidewalk in Manhattan, the red dress feeling more like a bullseye than armor, I remembered something Lorenzo had said. We were working late in his office one night. We were talking about a competitor who had tried to steal one of his contracts. Predators can smell fear, he had said without looking up from his papers. The second you show it, you are the prey. The only choice you have is to run or to show your teeth. Back then, I thought he was just talking about business strategy. Now, I knew it was the code he lived his life by. I took out my phone and ignored Tyler's messages. I scrolled to a number I had only been meant to use in an emergency. Lorenzo had put it in my phone himself during my first week of work. He told me to call him if I ever felt like I was in danger. I had laughed then and called him paranoid. I was not laughing anymore. He picked up on the first ring. Lily. His voice was different from how it sounded in the office. It was deeper, more personal, as if he had been expecting me to call. Where are you? Regis on West 54th Street. I need, my voice broke, and I hated how weak I sounded. Can you send someone for me? I do not want to take the subway. There were 3 seconds of silence that felt like an eternity. Then he said, Do not move. I am 5 minutes away. But he had already disconnected the call. I waited under the restaurant canopy, shivering even though the night was warm. 5 minutes later, a black Mercedes pulled silently to the curb. The driver's side window came down, and I saw it was not one of his usual drivers. It was Lorenzo himself. He was wearing the same dark suit from earlier, but his tie was loose, and the top button of his shirt was undone. His hair looked messy, like he had been running his fingers through it, and when his gray eyes met mine, his expression was absolutely lethal. Get in the car, Lily. I did as he said and slipped into the passenger seat. The leather was warm, and the car smelled of his cologne. Lorenzo did not drive away. He just sat there, looking forward, his hands gripping the steering wheel so hard that his knuckles turned white. What occurred? His voice was so calm it was chilling. Did he cause you any harm? No, not in a physical way. I struggled to find the words to describe it. Lorenzo, he knew who you were. He was aware I worked for you. He attempted to recruit me as an informant for his family. A muscle in Lorenzo's jaw twitched. Which family? He was not specific. He only mentioned that their business interests in the import sector coincided with yours. Tyler who? His gaze snapped to mine. What is his family name? I have no idea. We encountered each other at Sophia's party. Or so I was led to believe. The details were starting to connect. Each new piece was worse than the one before. The whole thing was a setup, was it not? He chose me on purpose. Lorenzo remained silent for a moment, letting it all sink in. Then he said, Tyler Monroe, early 30s, blonde hair, employed at Castani Financial. How could you know that? Because I have had him under surveillance watching you for the last 2 weeks. He finally let go of the steering wheel and turned his body completely toward me. His father is Vincent Monroe. They control the unions on the waterfront. They have been trying to force their way into my shipping business for months. My stomach plunged. You were aware? You knew someone was observing me and you chose not to tell me? I had my own person observing him while he watched you. You were never in any danger, Lily, except when I agreed to a date with him, which is the reason I was sitting 3 tables from you the entire night, waiting for him to reveal his true intentions. Lorenzo's voice grew deeper. Did you honestly believe I would allow you to enter a restaurant with a man I did not know, without having complete knowledge of who he was and his motives? I gazed at him, caught between anger at his audacity and a disloyal sense of relief that he had been there. You were following me. I was protecting you. There is a distinction. You did not have the right. I have every single right. He moved closer, and the car suddenly seemed incredibly small. You are in my employment, Lily. You are a component of my organization. That makes you my duty to protect. I am not some item you can monitor like a shipping tracker. No, you are a vulnerability. The words burst from him with a rare absence of his usual control. You go around in red dresses with that look, drawing the eyes of every man in a 50-mile radius, completely unaware that you are a beacon for anyone who wants to leverage you against me. The silence that came after was absolute. Lorenzo appeared as if he wished he could take back his words. His expression changed from rage to a guarded emptiness in a single moment, but it was already too late. The statement lingered between us, unable to be ignored. With what look? I asked in a quiet voice. His jaw became rigid. Lily, do not. You said with that look. What kind of look is that? Like you are fully aware of the power you wield. He shifted away, creating space between us again as his self-control returned. Like you are actively trying to make every man who lays eyes on you lose his mind. My heart was behaving erratically inside my chest, speeding up and then faltering, forgetting its normal rhythm. And have you lost your mind? Lorenzo did not reply for a very long time. Then, rather than answering, he started the engine and merged into the flow of traffic with more force than was strictly needed. We traveled in a tense quiet through Manhattan as the city's lights blurred past the windows. My mind should have been on the threat I had just avoided, on Tyler's proposal, on what it meant that rival families were now focused on me. But my only thought was of Lorenzo's hands clenching the steering wheel, the nerve pulsing in his jaw, and the deliberate way he avoided looking in my direction. Where are you taking us? I finally spoke when it dawned on me that we were driving uptown, away from Queens. My residence. We have to talk, and I have no faith in the security of your apartment. My apartment is perfectly safe. Your apartment has locks a child could bypass, and neighbors who would fail to notice if you were dragged out screaming. He executed a sudden turn. You will be staying with me for the night. In the morning, we will figure out a permanent solution. A permanent solution? I turned in my seat to look at him. Lorenzo, I am not relocating to your penthouse because a single man tried to turn me. A single man from a family who is now aware of your connection to me. A single man who will most certainly make another attempt, or send another person to do so. A single man who proved without a doubt that you are no longer secure living by yourself in a building with poor protection. He was not wrong. As much as I disliked admitting it, Tyler knew my address. He likely knew my daily schedule. The idea of returning to my apartment, of lying awake and wondering if every noise was an intruder, made my skin tighten. Just for this evening, I agreed. Then we find a proper solution. We will see. His building was one of those exclusive skyscrapers where the staff knew your name and the elevator would not operate without a security card. We went up to the highest floor without a word. The tension between us was so thick you could feel it. I had never been inside Lorenzo's home. I had never even considered that I would be. It felt unusually personal to cross this line from a professional relationship to a private one. The penthouse was precisely what I imagined, and completely different at the same time. It had minimalist modern decor and windows from floor to ceiling that showed a view that likely cost more than my childhood home. The kitchen had professional-level appliances that seemed to have been rarely used. Yet, there were also personal elements. Pictures of his family were on the fireplace mantel. A worn leather armchair sat near the window. Bookshelves were filled with books in both English and Italian. The guest room is located down the hallway. The second door, the one on the left, Lorenzo directed, slipping out of his suit coat and loosening his necktie more. You will find extra toiletries in the bathroom. I will have someone collect clothes from your apartment in the morning. Lorenzo, we both need to get some rest. He turned his back, walking toward the room I guessed was his bedroom. It has been a very long night. Wait. The word escaped before I could hold it back. He stopped but did not turn around. Why were you so furious? When I mentioned the date, your face looked, I do not know. Enraged. His shoulders grew tight. I was not angry. Yes, you were. You still are. I moved a step closer. And you were at that restaurant. You claimed to be 5 minutes out, but you were already there. You had been observing the entire time. Lorenzo slowly pivoted to look at me. In the faint light of his penthouse, with his tie undone and his iron self-control failing, he appeared transformed. He was less the cold syndicate leader and more a man at his breaking point. Yes, he admitted with simplicity. I was observing. Why? Because I am apparently a self-tormenting fool who gets pleasure from his own misery. A bitter smile touched his lips. Because seeing you prepare for an evening with another man was its own unique form of hell. But watching you actually follow through with it would have been even worse. Because for 6 months, I have tried to tell myself that my feelings for you are merely physical, just an inconvenient desire. And it is obvious I am a terrible liar, even to myself. His admission lingered in the space between us, stark and truthful and frightening. You cannot say things like that, I breathed. You are my employer. I am aware. You are a dangerous man. I am aware of that as well. This is an awful idea. It is possibly the worst one I have ever conceived. He took one step nearer, and then another, until there was almost no space between us. But I am finished with pretending, Lily. I am finished pretending I do not see you every single time you enter a room. I am finished pretending it does not drive me to madness when other men look at you. I am finished pretending I did not want to commit a murder tonight when I saw Tyler Monroe place his hands on you. My breathing stopped. Lorenzo, I promised myself I would maintain my distance, that I would remain professional. That you were entitled to someone ordinary, someone safe, someone who would not pull you into my kind of life. His hand rose, pausing near my face but not making contact. And then you came to work 6 months ago, with your clever words and even cleverer intellect, utterly unfazed by my reputation, rolling your eyes at my commands as if I were just some irritating supervisor. Do you have any concept of what that did to me? His hand finally touched me, his fingers tracing my jawline with a shockingly soft touch. I have been with gorgeous women, worldly women, women who understood the regulations of my world and followed them flawlessly. His thumb brushed against my lower lip, and a tremor went through me. Not one of them ever called me overly dramatic in front of my own people. Not one of them ever took my coffee. Not one of them ever looked at me in the way that you do, as if I am both the most aggravating man on this earth and also someone you might care for against all common sense. That is not true, I began, but the denial faded from my lips because he was correct. Heaven help me. He was completely correct. When did you realize it? I asked him instead. That you had feelings? The day you learned the truth about what I do. His face filled with regret. You came in that morning, set my coffee down, and spoke about the Martinelli delivery as if you were talking about the forecast. No fear, no condemnation, just pure, cold practicality. I knew right then that you were going to be my undoing. I recalled that day, remembering the surge of adrenaline from making that decision, from choosing to stay when I could have fled. I should have gone. Yes, he conceded, you definitely should have, but you did not. And with each day you remained, each time you challenged my instructions, each instance you saw me as a man instead of a monster. He stopped, shaking his head slightly. I was already lost long before I understood I was falling. The confession should have filled me with terror. This was Lorenzo Vitali, a man whose reputation made other men tremble, who commanded an enterprise founded on violence and intimidation. To become involved with him meant choosing a life of constant peril, of forever checking my surroundings, of never feeling truly secure. But as I stood there in his home, with his hand holding my face as if I were a delicate treasure, I could not recall why being safe had ever mattered so much. "This is madness," I whispered. "We hardly know one another. I know that you like your coffee with too much cream and not enough sugar. I know the nervous way you chew on your thumbnail. I know that every Sunday at 9 o'clock you call your mother. I see how you weep during commercials for animal shelters, but laugh at the worst jokes. I know a photograph of your grandmother is in your desk drawer, and you touch it when you need strength." His other hand rose to frame my face. "I see you, Lily Morgan, more than you know." And in that moment, I knew I saw him too. I knew he read Italian spy novels when he could not find sleep. I knew he took his espresso dark and bitter, just like his sense of humor. I knew a knife fight at 17 left a scar on his ribs, and that losing his mother almost broke him completely. I knew he gave money to literacy programs without anyone knowing, and that he once paused a major meeting to help a lost little girl find her parents. I knew that a man of incredible tenderness lived beneath that cold armor. "I am scared," I confessed. "You should be. This is not a fairy tale, Lily. The life I lead is a dangerous one. The people against me are without mercy. Being near me paints a target on your back that will never fade." His thumbs gently stroked my cheekbones. "But I am also done pretending I can stay away from you. I am tired of seeing you from across the office, of imagining the feeling of your touch, the taste of your kiss, of hearing my name from your lips without that professional wall in your voice." "Lorenzo," I whispered, and his eyes grew darker. "Like that," he said, his voice rough. "Exactly like that." The first kiss he gave me was soft, like a question. His lips were a ghost against mine, offering me every chance to move away. But I did not. I leaned closer, and the gentleness shattered. His hand tangled in my hair, tilting my head back as he kissed me like a man dying of thirst. It felt like 6 months of restraint had finally cracked. I fisted my hands in his shirt, pulling him nearer, losing myself in the taste of him. He tasted of risk and of want, and of every single thing I told myself I did not desire. His hands explored my back, his fingers finding the zipper on my red dress, and I pressed myself against his touch. "This dress," he breathed against my mouth. "Do you have any concept of what it did to me to see you wearing this dress?" "Tell me," I dared him, and a dark promise flashed in his eyes. "Later. For now, I want it off of you." He guided me backward into his bedroom, our lips never parting. The room was black except for the city lights that poured through the windows, but I did not notice. The only thing that existed was the feeling of Lorenzo's hands on my body, his mouth leaving a trail of fire down my neck, the sound of my name spoken like both a prayer and a curse. The zipper on the red dress slid open with a whisper. Cool air touched my hot skin, followed by the warmth of Lorenzo's possessive hands. The dress pooled around my feet, leaving me standing in nothing but my underthings and heels. I felt exposed and powerful under his hungry stare. "Beautiful," he whispered, and the reverence in his tone made me tremble. "So beautiful it is painful to see you." I reached for his shirt, my fingers clumsy on the buttons. He helped me, pulling out of it with impatience. In the faint light, I saw the scar he had told me about, and others whose stories I did not know. They were the evidence of a life of violence, of dangers that he had survived. I traced one with the tip of my finger and felt him shake beneath my touch. "These are a part of you," I said quietly, "but they are not all of you." For a moment I saw something unguarded in his eyes. Then he was kissing me again, and I could no longer think. There was only feeling. His hands, his mouth, the heat of our skin together. He lowered me to the bed with a surprising gentleness and covered my body with his. I locked my legs around his waist, drawing him in. "Tell me to stop," he commanded, his voice strained with a desire he barely held back. "Tell me you do not want this, and I will leave. I will sleep on the couch. We will act like this moment never occurred. But if you do not want me to stop, then you become mine." The ownership in his voice should have frightened me. Instead, it ignited a fire deep inside me. No more outings with stockbrokers. No more pretending this connection between us does not exist. "Mine, Lily, in every way that counts." "Yours," I consented. He let out a groan as his control finally broke apart completely. What happened next was everything I had ever dreamed of, and also completely different. Lorenzo was demanding, yet he was attentive. He was rough, yet he was careful. He took what he wanted, but he made certain I received what I needed. He learned the map of my body the way he learned all things, with an intense focus, committing every one of my reactions, every sound I made, to memory. And when I finally came apart in his arms, he captured my cries with a kiss and followed me into the darkness with my name on his lips. After, we remained tangled in his bedsheets. My head rested on his chest, while his fingers drew idle shapes on my shoulder. The city lights sparkled outside the windows, but inside his room, the world felt incredibly small and protected. "What happens next?" I asked in a low voice. Lorenzo was quiet for a second. "Now, everything changes. You will move in with me. You will have a security team 24 hours a day. No more taking the subway. No more spending nights by yourself in your apartment. You will stay close, where I am able to protect you." That sounds like a beautiful prison. "It is the price of being with me." His arms grew tighter around me. "I will not apologize for keeping you safe. I should have argued. I should have fought for my own freedom." But Tyler's chilling proposal was still sharp in my memory, a warning that I had entered Lorenzo's world if I wanted to or not. The real choice was if I would face its threats by myself or with him to shield me. "What about my job?" I asked. "I cannot really be your secretary and also your whatever this is." "Girlfriend," he said. "You are my girlfriend now, and you can keep your job if you want to. I enjoy having you near. Although I might have to hire another secretary to do the actual work, since I intend to spend a great deal of my time distracting you. In spite of it all, a smile touched my lips against his chest. Very professional. I am many things, tesoro. Professional is not always one of them. The Italian term of endearment made my heart flutter inside my stomach. What does that mean? Treasure. Because that is what you are. Something rare and precious that must be protected. He laid a kiss on the crown of my head. Get some rest. We have much to talk about tomorrow, and I must resolve the Monroe situation. The thought of Tyler sent a wave of cold through me. What are you planning to do to him? Nothing that will last forever, Lorenzo promised me. I will just make it absolutely clear that you are now under my protection. Any future attempts to use you against me will bring about terrible consequences. Lorenzo, please. This is the way my world operates, Lily. Choices have results. He made the choice to use you. Now he must pay the price. His voice was still as smooth as silk. But because you are asking me to hold back, I will, this one time, for you. It should have disturbed me more. The casual way he talked about menacing people was unsettling, but I was so tired, and Lorenzo's heartbeat under my ear was a steady, comforting rhythm. Held in his arms, lying in his bed, I felt more secure than I had in months. As I drifted into sleep, I heard him whisper something in Italian. It was too soft and fast for me to understand, but I could have sworn that it sounded like a prayer. I awoke to sunlight pouring through windows I did not recognize and the aroma of fresh coffee. For a second, I was lost. This was not my tiny apartment in Queens. The bed was far too big, the sheets were too luxurious, the view was too amazing. Then the memories came rushing back. Lorenzo, the kiss, and all that came after. I pushed myself up, holding the sheet to my chest, and saw a note on the pillow next to me in Lorenzo's perfect handwriting had to take care of business. Coffee is ready in the kitchen. Do not even consider leaving this apartment without security. All business, even in his notes to me. Some things were constant. I located one of his shirts, a white one that came down to the middle of my thigh, and walked barefoot to the kitchen. He was true to his word. Fresh coffee was waiting in a fancy machine that likely cost more than my entire car. As I filled a cup, I saw myself in the window's reflection. Barefoot, in Lorenzo Vitali's shirt, my hair a mess from his hands, my lips still puffy from his kisses. I appeared completely ruined. I appeared happy. I appeared terrified, because this was my reality now. It was not some daydream I could ignore as a simple office crush. It was not something I could keep apart from the rest of my life. Lorenzo had laid his claim on me, and in his world, a claim like that always came with a cost. My phone vibrated on the kitchen counter. Lorenzo's security team must have gotten it from my purse. Messages were pouring in. 3 were from Sophia, asking me to tell her how the date went. 2 were from a number I did not know that sent ice through my veins. Last night was a mistake. We need to talk, Tyler. Then, 5 minutes later, a new one arrived. Do not make this more difficult than it has to be. My family can make your life a nightmare. I was looking at the words, debating whether to show Lorenzo or deal with it alone, when the penthouse door swung open. Lorenzo walked in. He was in the same clothes from the night before, yet he still managed to look flawless. His eyes locked onto me instantly, and a dark, possessive light flickered within them. "Good morning," he said, closing the distance between us. He cupped my face and gave me a deep kiss. "You are wearing my shirt. I did not have another option. Someone destroyed my dress. I will get you 10 more. His thumb brushed against my lower lip. "Although I like you much better this way, marked as mine." "So possessive," I whispered against his mouth, but I was smiling. "You have no idea." He pulled away just enough for his expression to become serious. "Tyler sent you messages." It was not a question. Of course he was aware. "You are monitoring my phone." "I am protecting you," he corrected me. "There is a difference." And yes, I saw the messages. Marco is already taking care of it. Taking care of it how? Lorenzo's smile was cold. Tyler Monroe is about to have a difficult conversation with his father, Lorenzo stated. He will need to justify why he threatened someone I protect. By nightfall, his entire family will learn that you are not to be touched. His words laid bare the truth of this world. Power is the only real shield. And it left me wondering what would happen next. The violence simmering under his calm exterior should have scared me, but it did not. I felt a wave of relief. Tyler's menacing words had shaken me deeply. With Lorenzo taking control, I could finally take a full breath. I have no clothes, I reminded him. And I need to get to the office. It will fall apart without me. That is already handled, he said. Marco dispatched your assistant, Rosa, to your apartment. She is gathering your belongings and will arrive within the hour. He then led me toward the kitchen island and settled me onto a high stool. You will not be going to work, he declared. You are taking the day. We have security measures to review. My chest tightened. Lorenzo, I have to go in. You are with the boss now, he said simply. You can do as you please. He navigated the kitchen with an unexpected ease, gathering items to make breakfast. The clink of a bowl, the soft thud of a carton on the counter. You need a day to recover after what happened, he added. I observed him as he cracked eggs, my mind struggling. This man, so at home in a kitchen, was the same cold crime lord I answered to at work. The two images felt impossible together. You know how to cook? I asked, my voice thin. My mother made sure all of us learned. She believed that relying on anyone for simple survival was a flaw. A gentle look crossed his face as he remembered. She also believed the path to someone's affection was through their stomach, though she usually meant that in a romantic sense. Tell me more about her, I requested softly. He had spoken of his mother previously, but only briefly. Each time, his tone held a blend of affection and sorrow that showed the wound had not yet healed. For a long moment, Lorenzo said nothing, his attention fixed on whipping the eggs. She was a small woman, but incredibly powerful, barely 5 feet in height, he began. But her presence commanded the attention of any room she entered. Here was the revelation of how his world was built. She managed the family's public-facing enterprises, the restaurants, the import company. My father took care of the other business. He tipped the egg mixture into a heated skillet. She passed away when I was 23. It was a heart attack, no warning. His voice was flat. One moment, we were fighting about a woman I was seeing. The next, she was no longer there. I am so sorry, I whispered. I was too. I still am. With an expert motion, he slid the finished omelet onto a plate, arranging toast and fresh fruit beside it. She would have approved of you, he said. She would have admired your resilience and how you refused to be scared. A small smile touched his lips. She would not have liked that you were my employee, though. No, he conceded, placing the dish in front of me. She would have despised that, but she would have admired your ability to endure 6 months with me without resigning or trying to kill me. His eyes held a hint of humor. That requires a unique kind of strength. I tasted the omelet. It was cooked to perfection, seasoned beautifully. This is incredible. How did you know mushrooms and Gruyere were my favorite? Because I notice things, Tesoro, he said, his voice low. I always notice you. He rested against the counter, holding a coffee mug, observing me with a look of contentment. True power was not just violence, it was attention to detail. It was protection. And that, he continued, is how I know that Tyler's texts are not the only thing on your mind. He was too perceptive. I am scared of what this all means, I admitted. For us. Your life is dangerous, Lorenzo. It is, he confirmed, but you have been a part of it for half a year, regardless of our relationship. The only difference is that now my protection can be out in the open. The system had already failed me. The police could not stop a man like Tyler. Lorenzo's world was the only one offering real safety. He put his mug down and came to stand in front of me. I understand the weight of what I am asking, the risk, the constant watchfulness, the reality that my rivals could use you as a target. He paused. If you wish to leave, I will arrange for your complete disappearance. A secure location where no one could ever locate you. A new name, a new beginning, total security. The proposition should have felt like a lifeline, an opportunity to go back to a normal existence. Instead, the idea of a life without Lorenzo, without his touch, his voice, his nickname for me, caused a sharp pain in my heart. And if leaving is not what I want, I asked, then you will remain here, where my protection is absolute. You can continue your work, but we will have to be cautious at the office. And you must understand that you now belong to me in all important ways. His hands settled on my waist, drawing me toward him. This means accepting bodyguards, constant surveillance, and restrictions on your movement. Your well-being is more important to me than your autonomy. His justice was a possessive thing. That is a significant demand. I am aware. But I am not a generous man, Lily. I have desired you since you first entered my office. I have you now, and I will not release you. His brow rested against mine. Promise me you will stay. I should have analyzed the situation. I should have considered every angle and made a logical choice. But my own voice surprised me. I will stay, I heard myself say, but on my terms. A slight smile appeared on his face. Naturally, state them. First, I began, I continue my job. I will not be some trophy, Lorenzo. I must have my own purpose. Done, he said. Second, you do not decide things about my security without my input. I am not a helpless little girl who needs sheltering from reality. That can be discussed, he countered, in a situation of immediate threat. Then you tell me everything as soon as the danger has passed, I interrupted, meeting his eyes. I mean it. The truth does not scare me, but being uninformed and powerless does. Silence enables harm, and I would not be silent. He thought about it, then gave a slow nod. Acceptable. Is there more? Third, you will never lie to me. I can face a difficult reality, but I will not tolerate a convenient falsehood. I can agree to that, he replied, his hands moving up my torso. Any other conditions? Only one. My hands went to his hair, urging him nearer. You must always know that I am here by choice. It is because I want to be with you, not because I am too scared to run. If this ever feels more like a prison than a partnership, I will walk away. A flicker of something raw showed in his expression. I cannot guarantee you will always feel unrestricted. My life has rules that cannot be bent, but I can guarantee I will never hold you here against your will. He was an imperfect protector, and this was an imperfect promise. Liar, I whispered. You would follow me to the edge of the world. Most likely, he conceded, but my goal would be to convince you to return on your own. Before another word could be spoken, his phone vibrated. He looked at the screen, and his face hardened. Marco, he said into the phone, the problem with the Monroes has intensified. Intensified in what way? I asked as he ended the call. Lorenzo's jaw clenched. Vincent Monroe is demanding a sit-down this evening. He claims he wants to talk about shared interests and his son's misjudgment. He gave me a calculating look. He will attempt to make this right, to pay for what Tyler did. And you will decline his offer? I will make him understand that any new attempt to reach you will be seen as an act of war. His tone was icy, devoid of emotion. The crime lord had returned. After that, I will make certain the entire Monroe family knows that coming after you was the most significant error they will ever make. A sharp rap on the door broke the tension. Lorenzo went rigid, his hand instinctively going to the weapon I knew he carried at his back. A moment later, he eased his stance. That will be Rosa with your luggage. He was right. His aide entered carrying 2 big suitcases and a few store bags. Miss Morgan, she said, her smile telling me she understood the situation. I believe I brought everything you could want. Please tell me if I forgot something. Thank you, Rosa. I felt a flush of embarrassment. She saw me in Lorenzo's shirt and knew I had stayed the night. But her expression was calm, as if it was perfectly ordinary for the boss to begin seeing his assistant. It made me feel isolated in my own strangeness. Once she was gone, I carried my things to a spare bedroom. I could feel Lorenzo's gaze as he followed, propping himself against the door. His dark, intense eyes watched my every move. You are making it hard to focus, I said, taking out a pair of jeans and a comfortable sweater. That is my intention, he replied. He pushed off the wall and spun me around to face him. You will not be using the guest room. His tone was final. You belong to me now, Lily. You will sleep in my bed. I will wake with you in my arms. I need to know you are secure each night. His hands cupped my cheeks. I need you near me. That confession of need, so raw and open, was my undoing. All right, I conceded, but no stealing all the blankets. A true, brilliant smile lit up his features. I make no such guarantees. I am Italian. We are possessive of everything, especially our covers. The remainder of the day was a strange mix of normal life and a new reality. Lorenzo conducted business from his home office. I wandered the large apartment, trying to process the sudden shift in my world. Periodically, he would come out just to find me, to draw me into a deep kiss that stole my breath away. This was the start of recovery. As night fell, his demeanor changed. His meeting with Vincent Monroe was set for 9 o'clock. It would take place at a restaurant Lorenzo owned, a safe location with his own men guarding it. I saw the strain gather in his shoulders and the hard look return to his eyes. I am going with you, I announced while he was getting ready to depart. Lorenzo stopped his inspection of his handgun and faced me. There is no chance of that. He is meeting you because of me, I insisted. I have a right to be there. Lily, these situations can become violent. I will not expose you to that risk. I am already exposed. I refused to back down, folding my arms across my chest. To be silent was to be a victim. Tyler came after me. His father wants to make a deal about me. I have earned a seat at that table. Lorenzo watched me, his face unreadable for a long time. To my surprise, he finally gave a single nod. Very well, but you will not speak unless I give you permission. And if the situation deteriorates, you will follow Marco's instructions without question. Do you understand? I understand. 60 minutes later, our car stopped in front of Salvatore, an exclusive Italian place in Manhattan owned by Lorenzo. The restaurant was shut down for the evening. Lorenzo's security was posted at every door. Walking inside, I could feel every eye on me. They all saw that their boss had brought a woman into their world. Vincent Monroe was waiting at a big table in the middle of the room. He was surrounded by two men who were obviously his protection. He looked to be in his early 60s, older than I had imagined. He had silver hair and icy blue eyes that examined me like prey as we drew closer. The stage for justice was set. Vincent greeted Lorenzo, but his eyes never left me. He looked at me like I was the source of all their problems. He said, "This must be the young lady who started all this." Lorenzo's voice was cold. His hand rested on my lower back, a possessive gesture. He said, "This is Lily Morgan. She is my girlfriend. She is the reason we are here." Vincent's smile was empty. "Your son showed terrible judgment." Lorenzo replied, "Tyler wanted a business partnership. His approach was too forceful, but he only meant business. He wanted my girlfriend to spy on me." Lorenzo's voice was like velvet over sharp metal. "That is not business, Vincent. That is a declaration of war." Vincent replied, "Let's not get ahead of ourselves." Lorenzo leaned forward. "Let me be perfectly clear. Miss Morgan is protected by me. If you try to contact her again, or use her, or even look at her the wrong way, there will be consequences. They will be severe." Vincent's jaw tightened. You are not being reasonable. This was a small misunderstanding. There is no misunderstanding, Lorenzo stated. Your family attempted to use her to get to me. I cannot forgive that. Lorenzo's hand shifted to his side. I knew he was touching the gun he kept there. This is the only warning you will receive. The air in the room became thick with tension. Vincent's men tensed up, their hands moving toward their own weapons. Lorenzo's security team stepped closer, forming a shield around us. Then, a chill ran down my spine when Vincent smiled. You have changed, Vital. When did you start letting a woman make you so emotional? When did she make you weak? Be careful, Lorenzo said softly. The threat in his voice was impossible to miss. You are about 3 seconds away from discovering just how weak I really am. Vincent raised his hands as if to surrender. I am just pointing out that this reaction feels extreme. Tyler made a move on an attractive woman. You have made it clear she belongs to you. Why can't you just accept my apology so we can move on? I am prepared to offer money for any trouble this has caused. I do not want your money, Vincent. I want your guarantee that your family will never go near Lily again. I want you to tell every crew in this city that she is completely untouchable. And what if I say no? Lorenzo's smile was chilling. Then we will have a war. I will take apart everything you have ever built, piece by piece. I will start with your operations on the waterfront, and I will end with your son's kneecaps. The brutal threat should have made me sick. Instead, a strange part of me was touched by how fiercely Lorenzo defended me. He refused to let anyone treat me like a threat. Vincent looked at Lorenzo for a long time, thinking over his choices. He finally let out a breath. Fine. You have my promise. The Monroe family will leave Miss Morgan alone. We will spread the word that she is under vital protection. A wise decision, Lorenzo said. His grip on my back grew tighter. Now leave my restaurant. We stood and watched them go. The tension in the room slowly faded. The moment the door shut, Lorenzo turned and held my face in his hands. Are you all right? I am fine, I said. I struggled to find the right word. That was intense. That was me holding back, he said. If you were not here, I would have shot him for calling you a weakness. He rested his forehead against mine. You are not a weakness, Toro. You are my strength. You are the reason I wake up every day trying to build a better world. My heart ached at his words. Lorenzo, I know this is too new. I know we are going too fast, but I have never felt this way about anyone before. I feel like I would destroy the world just to keep you safe. His thumb gently brushed my cheek. I would leave all of this behind. The power, the organization, all of it. I would walk away if you said the word. Please do not, I whispered. Do not make promises like that. Why should I not? Because words like that make me hope for things that can never happen, not for people who live in your world. But what if I told you I am making us happen? For years, I have been working to make my businesses legitimate, to cut myself off from the violence. He moved back just enough to look into my eyes. I did not tell you this before because I did not want you to feel I was changing for you. The real reason is that meeting you pushed up my schedule. It made me understand that I wanted a future with both my empire and the woman I love. Those words felt raw and true, hanging in the air between us. Your love for me is so strong it frightens me. His voice was heavy with emotion. I have done awful things, Lily. I have caused pain and made choices that still follow me. But being with you makes me want to be a good man. It makes me want to be worthy of you. I kissed him at that moment, putting all the words I could not speak into that single touch. When we pulled away from each other, we were both breathing heavily. I whispered, I would be happy to go home with you. The air in the car on the way to the penthouse felt thick with anticipation. Lorenzo kept his hand on my leg, a warm and possessive touch. From time to time, he would look over at me, his dark eyes making a silent promise about what would happen once we were alone. The moment the door closed, he pinned me against it. His mouth found mine with a desperate kind of hunger. I locked my legs around his waist, and he carried me toward the bedroom, leaving a path of our clothes on the floor. Mine, he growled into my neck. I gasped when his teeth grazed my sensitive skin. Yours, I agreed. He groaned and then lifted me onto the bed. He was gentle despite the raw need between us. This time was different from the first. It was slower, more intentional. Lorenzo took his time to explore my body. He learned what made me gasp and what made me moan. When our bodies finally joined, it felt like a missing piece clicking into place. It was like two parts of a puzzle that were always made for each other. Later, we were tangled in the sweaty sheets. His fingers drew light circles on my skin. I finally asked the question that had been bothering me since the restaurant. What will happen if Vincent breaks his promise? Lorenzo's hand stopped moving. Then I will keep mine. War, I said. How many people would be killed? Too many. His voice was heavy with regret. That is why I made a threat so real that he will have to respect it. Vincent Monroe is a businessman above all else. He will compare the cost of going after you with the cost of a war with me. He will see it is not worth the price. And if he does not? I asked. Then I will protect what belongs to me, no matter what it costs. He turned to face me, his expression serious. I will not lie to you, Lily. The world I live in is violent. People get hurt. Lines are crossed. If you choose to stay with me, you will see things and hear things, and know things that you can never forget. Are you certain you can live with that? I thought of Tyler's cold offer, of Vincent's predatory stare, and how easily they talked about using me. Lorenzo's world was brutal, but at least he was honest about it. At least to him, I was more than just a tool. I am sure, I finally said, but I need one promise from you. Anything, he said. Do not let it swallow you whole. The violence, the power, the urge for control. Do not lose yourself so much that the man I fell for disappears. A flicker of vulnerability showed in his eyes. You fell for me? Yes, I said. Somewhere between you being an unbearable boss and a surprisingly tender man, I fell. I touched his cheek, the rough stubble against my palm. It is probably the most reckless thing I have ever done. It is definitely the most reckless thing you have ever done, he said, with a self-mocking smile. But I promise I will try my best to stay human for you. I will try to remember that life is more than just power games and turf wars. That is all I am asking. We fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms. The city lights made patterns on the walls. For the first time since I came to New York, I felt like I was home. Home was not a place, it was a person. The next morning started a new rhythm for us. Lorenzo would make coffee while I took a shower. We ate breakfast together. Then Marco would drive us to the office while we went over the day's plans. At work, we kept a professional wall between us, but I would often catch him watching me. His eyes were hot with a promise of what would come later. This change from boss and secretary to lovers should have been strange, but it felt right. Our playful arguments now had a deeper meaning. A simple touch was now filled with unspoken promises. When we were alone in his office, he would pull me into his lap. He would kiss me until we both forgot why professional lines were supposed to matter. We are terrible at being discreet, I said one afternoon. I was fixing my shirt after a very passionate session on his desk. I do not care, Lorenzo said, straightening his tie. He looked completely pleased with himself. Let them talk. I want everyone to know you belong to me. So possessive, I teased. You love it, he replied. I could not say he was wrong. A week went by in a happy new routine. There were no more threats from the Monroes. There was no more late-night danger. There was only work in the daytime and Lorenzo's bed at night. I started to let myself think that maybe we could actually make it work. I started to believe that love could find a way to grow in his dark world. And then everything fell apart. I was in Lorenzo's office putting files away when Marco stormed in. He did not even knock. His face was dark. Boss, we have a problem. Lorenzo looked up from his computer. What kind of problem? Vincent Monroe is dead, Marco said. He was shot outside his house 2 hours ago. Marco's eyes shifted to me. And now there are rumors spreading that we were the ones who ordered it. The blood drained from Lorenzo's face. What? I asked. It was not us, was it? I already knew the answer. Lorenzo had been with me the entire night and the whole morning. It was impossible. Of course, it was not us. Lorenzo was already on his feet, grabbing his phone. But someone wants it to look like it was. He turned to Marco. Get our lawyers ready. Find out who is spreading these lies. There is more, Marco said, his voice grim. Tyler Monroe is calling for. He wants revenge. He is gathering the other families, telling them you shattered the peace accord, that you murdered his father without a second thought. Lorenzo's jaw clenched. He is using this as a pretext to ignite the war we managed to prevent. Or somebody else killed Vincent and made it seem like our work to provoke a war. I gave voice to the thought we all shared. Who gains if you and the Monroes annihilate one another? At least half a dozen other families. Lorenzo combed a hand through his hair, a rare display of frustration. And every single one of them would gladly watch us destroy each other. What is our next move? I asked. Lorenzo met my eyes, and for the first time I had ever known him, I saw genuine fear there. It was not for himself, but for me. We get ready for war. The following 72 hours became a haze of anxiety and readiness. Lorenzo relocated me to a secure location, a reinforced apartment in one of his buildings, complete with armed security at every doorway. I despised being confined, but I knew it was necessary. If Tyler Monroe sought vengeance, I would be his primary objective. Lorenzo came to see me whenever he could, constantly flanked by guards, looking more depleted with each visit. The pressure of handling a major crisis while keeping me out of harm's way was clearly wearing him down. You need to eat, I told him one evening, seeing him move food around his plate without taking a bite. You will not be any good to anyone if you collapse from being tired. I will eat when this is done. But he took a bite regardless, just to satisfy me. We are getting close to finding out who really killed Vincent. As soon as we have confirmation, we can demonstrate to the other families that we are being set up. And if Tyler is not interested in proof, if all he needs is a reason to come after you, then he will get precisely what he is looking for. Lorenzo's face was like ice, but it will be on my terms, not his. The big break happened 3 days after Vincent's murder. Marco had identified the real assassin, a contract killer hired by the Russo family, one of Lorenzo's lesser rivals. They had murdered Vincent and fabricated evidence that incriminated Lorenzo, aiming to start a conflict that would wipe out both organizations. The evidence was undeniable. Telephone logs, money trails, and testimony from witnesses. Lorenzo arranged a summit with all the leading families, laying out the proof with Marco and his legal team beside him. I observed from a secure video link in the safe house, my heart pounding in my chest while Lorenzo presented his argument. Tyler Monroe remained expressionless during the entire presentation. After Lorenzo concluded, Tyler rose to his feet. Even if what you say is true, it changes nothing. My father is gone, and your lifestyle is what killed him. A price has to be paid. Then the Russos should pay it, Lorenzo stated with a chill in his voice. They took your father's life and tried to pin it on me. They manipulated you into demanding my death. Are you really going to let them succeed with that? The other family leaders began to whisper among themselves, persuaded by what they had seen. Tyler's supporters were deserting him one after another, seeing that to keep chasing Lorenzo would make them seem idiotic at best, or complicit at worst. At last, Tyler fell back into his seat. Fine, we will handle the Russos. But this matter is not settled, Vitale. My family does not forgive. Neither does mine, Lorenzo answered calmly. Do not forget that. The meeting concluded, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me. The outcome was not flawless. Tyler still held a grudge. The Russos would be dealt with. But at least a full-blown war was averted. At least Lorenzo was out of danger. He arrived at the safe house that night, appearing exhausted but also relieved. I greeted him at the entrance, throwing my arms around him before he had a chance to speak. For a long time we just embraced each other, allowing the stress to melt away. "It is finished," he whispered into my hair. "You can return home now." "This was never about the apartment, Lorenzo. I am already home whenever I am with you." He drew back to gaze at me, his eyes filled with gentle emotion. How did I ever get so fortunate? I ask myself that same thing. I gave him a soft kiss. Although I think it might have something to do with superior coffee-making abilities. He chuckled, the sound hoarse after days of intense pressure. That has to be it. We returned to the penthouse that evening, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I could truly breathe. The immediate danger was over. We had made it through, but Lorenzo's world had revealed its violent nature, and I understood it was just a matter of time until the next danger appeared. 1 month later, life had found a new kind of normalcy. I was working again, even though everyone was aware that I was Lorenzo's girlfriend. Some of his men treated me with a newfound deference, while others showed a poorly hidden disapproval. It did not matter to me. I had Lorenzo, I had work that felt important, and I had a life that had purpose despite the risks. We were in his office one afternoon when I came to a decision that had been growing inside me for weeks. I want to learn everything. Lorenzo glanced up from his documents. Learn everything about what? Your world. The way it functions. Who all the important people are. What all the regulations are. I leaned on his desk. If I am going to be a part of your life, I have to understand the entire game. I have to anticipate the plays before they are made. He observed me for a long moment. It is not too late for you to leave, you realize. To go back to a safe, ordinary life. I am picking you. You are my ordinary now. I met his gaze without flinching. Teach me. And he did. During the next few months, Lorenzo taught me about the intricate power dynamics of his life. I discovered which families were reliable, which ones were competitors, and which ones were just biding their time to make a move. I learned to decipher the quiet cues in conversations, to grasp the significance of specific phrases and body language. It felt like mastering a new language, one where what was left unsaid often carried more weight than spoken words, and where respect was a form of currency as powerful as cash. Lorenzo was a patient instructor, never condescending, and always taking my inquiries seriously. Bit by bit, I evolved from being just his girlfriend in need of saving. I became his associate, a person he would ask for strategic advice, a person whose opinions he cherished. "You are very good at this," he remarked one night, after I had accurately forecasted an opponent's next action. Frighteningly good. I had a wonderful teacher. I snuggled into his side on the sofa. "I am observant. That is true." His arm wrapped more tightly around me. "I have been contemplating the future, thinking about what comes next when I am prepared to step away from the more hazardous parts of my work. About who could manage things in a way that preserves our influence but lessens the conflict." He looked down at me. "About whether you would ever think about being something more than just my girlfriend." My heart skipped a beat. "Lorenzo, I am not asking you to marry me." "Not." He cleared his throat. "Yet." His thumb gently brushed my shoulder. "But I need you to understand that when I do ask, and I will, it will not only be about love, it will be about a partnership, about creating something together that is more powerful than either one of us could be alone." That almost sounds like a business proposal for a wedding. That is what it is. He gently turned me around so I was facing him. In my world, a marriage is about creating an alliance and a partnership just as much as it is about love. I want all of those things with you, Lily. I want to connect our lives in every single way that is important. I should have been terrified by how intense he sounded, but instead, a feeling of calm settled inside my chest. It was a kind of certainty I had never felt before. "Then ask me. Not right now." He gave me a soft kiss. When I ask you to marry me, it will be flawless. It will be a moment that is good enough for the woman who changed my world. You were impossible to look away from and even more difficult to let go. 6 months after our first night when I wore the red dress, Lorenzo brought me back to Richie's restaurant. It was the location of our disastrous first date. This time, however, the restaurant was completely empty. It was closed for everyone except for the two of us. Candles were burning on every single table. In the corner, a string quartet was playing a quiet melody. And then Lorenzo got down on one knee next to my chair, holding a small velvet box. I knew this was the perfect moment he had promised me. "Lily Morgan," he started, his voice firm even though his eyes were filled with emotion. "You came into my world wearing practical shoes and an inexpensive suit. You were not impressed by anything I had created. You told me I was overly dramatic. You took my coffee. You made me laugh at a time when I thought I had forgotten how. And somewhere between your annoyed glances and your clever replies, I fell completely and totally in love with you." By then, tears were already falling down my cheeks. "I cannot promise that you will always be safe. My world is just too dangerous for that. I cannot promise that things will be simple. My life is far too complex." His thumb gently brushed against my hand. "But I can promise you that I will give you everything I am. My heart, my faithfulness, my protection, my partnership in creating something new and better than what I had before. Marry me, my treasure. Be my wife, my partner, my one and only." "Yes," I said through my tears. "Yes, you impossible, demanding, incredible man. Yes." He put the ring on my finger. It was a beautiful emerald-cut diamond with smaller gems on each side. It was elegant and somehow just right. Then he got to his feet, drew me into his arms, and kissed me while the music from the quartet grew louder and more triumphant. "I love you," he whispered against my mouth. "My Lily, my treasure, my home." "And I love you," I answered. "My Lorenzo, my impossible decision, my perfect kind of danger." We were married 3 months after that in a quiet service. It was attended by people from both of our lives, his family and my family, his business partners and my friends, the legal ones and the not-so-legal ones. My father escorted me down the aisle, and he looked a little stunned by everything happening around him. My mother cried during the entire ceremony. But when Lorenzo held my hands and said his vows to me in both English and Italian, his voice shaking a little on the promises, nothing else was important. Not the risk, not the difficult parts, not the quiet talk about the life I was choosing. The only thing that was important was the way he looked at me. It was as if I was his rescue, as if I had found a man who lived in shadows and showed him the sun. Our first dance was to an Italian love song that his mother used to love. Lorenzo held me tightly and spoke the English words into my ear. "You are my sun, you are my moon, and you are my stars. If you were not here, I would be lost in the night." "It is a good thing I am here to be your light then," I joked. And he smiled, twirling me across the dance floor. Later, as we were leaving for our honeymoon, a full month in Italy to see Lorenzo's family homes, I looked over my shoulder at the reception. I saw the strange mix of people who were there to celebrate us. I saw the life that I had accidentally fallen into after I sent a text message to the wrong number. "Do you have any regrets?" Lorenzo asked, seeing where I was looking. I turned back toward him, this risky, powerful, and unexpectedly gentle man. He had taken my heart without asking, and had guarded it with everything he had ever since. "My only regret is that I did not wear the red dress more. It clearly holds some kind of magical ability. That dress was almost the death of me." His hands moved to my waist, and he pulled me to him. "Seeing you walk out of your room wearing it, knowing you were getting dressed for some other guy, I wanted to take you back to my penthouse and never let you out of my sight. You are always so possessive." He gave me a long kiss, not caring about the applause from the guests who were still there. "But you enjoy it." "I love you," I said to correct him. "The possessiveness is just an extra benefit." "Where are you going in that dress?" he had asked 6 months before, with both envy and desire fighting in his voice. And now, I finally knew the answer. I was exactly where I was always supposed to be. I was home. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to bring you meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Thank you for listening until the end.